Welcome everyone, I'm Lauren Bay. I'm going to share a few words with you today. Connectedness, deference to elders, family reputation, anxiety, depression, stigma, shame, hope. These are words representing values and experiences that bring many of us here today. Welcome everyone to the AAPI FSA hosted panel discussion on mental health across AAPI generations. As the program and events coordinator for an employee resource group that is still very young, not even 2 years old, I've taken our mission and purpose to heart with our Heritage Week and especially this event. 2 of our 5 AAPI Faculty and Staff Association objectives, foster community and a sense of belonging for the AAPI population at UofL, and promote awareness of the challenges and unique experiences of the AAPI community, are the foundation of this panel. I want to thank the Office of Diversity and Equity and the Commission on Diversity and Racial Equity for their support of this week's event celebrating AAPI Heritage Week. And I invite you all to attend our keynote event with Dr. Evelyn Huda-Hart this Thursday at 11:30 a.m., which will be held in the SAC multipurpose room and available live streaming. Now, let me briefly introduce our panel members before they share their own stories that brought them here. Starting next to me is our moderator, Dr. Rachaniwan Ross, and she is a professor at the UofL School of Nursing and is a first-generation Asian American from Thailand. Even though growing up with poverty, her love of school and hard work paid off, leading her to receive a PhD in nursing from Case Western Reserve in Cleveland, Ohio, where she met her husband and gave birth to their son. Her area of expertise is in the mental health of culturally diverse individuals who have experienced extreme stress, violence, trauma, and stigmatization. Her medical contributions include a recommendation for healthcare providers to screen for depression among perinatal women with HIV, which is included in the Health and Human Services HIV/AIDS clinical guidelines. Dr. Dimitra Antimisieris leads the Fraser Polypharmacy and Medication Management Program, which is a program dedicated to education, research, and outreach to help solve the problems associated with polypharmacy. Her primary research interest is in the area of decision-making about medication use by all stakeholders, prescribers, caregivers, healthcare systems, and consumers, and the factors which influence those decisions. She is a 4th-generation Asian American who grew up in Monterey Park, California, with many family ties still there. Allie Morris, licensed professional counselor associate, graduated from Center College with her bachelor's degree and obtained her master's degree in clinical mental health counseling at Xavier University. She specializes in providing therapy for adults with anxiety, adult adoptees, and Asian Americans. She is also the creator of the podcast Adoptional, which shares stories of international adoptees and unique challenges they face. She describes herself as a transracial adoptee from China raised by white parents in Kentucky. Suhas Kulkarni is a business coach and franchise consultant who has started and run his own businesses since 1986. He is a first-generation Asian American and has been involved with numerous nonprofits in the city for over 30 years and is now dedicated to helping immigrants start and succeed in businesses of their own. Suhas is an adjunct professor at Global Business at UofL, conducts meditation, self-discovery, and self-awareness classes at the Driping Gomag Center for Engaging Compassion, and is the father of Kentucky State Representative Nimo Kulkarni. Dr. Kellen Choi is a fellowship-trained urologist specializing in pelvic reconstructive surgery, neurourology, and voiding dysfunction at UofL Health. She is also a faculty at UofL School of Medicine, where she is passionate about medical education and teaching students. She is a 1.5 generation Korean American who grew up in Texas in the 90s and spurred the creation of this panel while reading psychologist Dr. Jenny Wang's book, Permission to Come Home, Reclaiming Mental Health as Asian Americans. She also serves as the membership coordinator for the AAPI Faculty and Staff Association. Danyal Malik is a card through and through. A transplant from Pakistan at the age of 7, he is a recent first-generation graduate from UofL School of Public Health. While in school, he served as the vice president for School of Public Health SGA Council, chair of the Appropriation Committee for the University SGA, and public health liaison for Compassion Clinic. Currently, he is a staff member at the Division of Surgical Oncology, prevention specialist for the Kentucky Opioid Response Effort in Frankfort, Kentucky, serves as a mentor for Big Brothers, Big Sisters of Kentucky, and is a UofL Coder Commissioner and an at-large member for the AAPI FSA. So before we get started with our panel discussion, given what has happened today in Louisville and the nature of this panel discussion, we thought it would be appropriate to have a moment of silence as well as have an activity for our own mental well-being that will be led by Allie Morris. So let's please take a moment of silence for those who have lost their lives and their families and friends. All right, Allie Morris, you ready? Do you want me to bring this to you? Oh, I think you're okay. You can use one of those right there.
Can you hear me? Okay, cool. Yes. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming today. Given the light of the events, I thought it would be a good idea to just kind of reset and recenter based on the things that have been happening in the world, not just today, but just in the world in general. It feels like every time you turn on the news or every time you look at social media, something tragic and new has happened, unfortunately. It can be really draining for those, not even those who are involved personally, but also just those who are seeing it from afar, and even more so when it's in our own community. So I'd like to lead us in a mindfulness and meditation activity today, and it's called a loving and kindness meditation. And so if you would, and if you're willing, just get in a comfy position in your chair, wherever that means for you. You can cross your legs, uncross them. You can close your eyes, or you can look down, whatever is more comfortable for you, with the note that whatever makes you feel safe is what's most important here. There's no wrong way to do this, just doing what best works for you. And so I'm probably going to close my eyes just because that's most comfy for me, but do what you want to. And so to begin the meditation, we're going to breathe in through our nose, and we're going to exhale through our mouth, with the ideal combination being a shorter breath in through our nose and a longer exhale through our mouth. So if we could do that just a couple times just to get centered and being a note of like where you're feeling it in our bodies, and being aware that we're in this room, we're present, and we're safe, and we're together. So breathing in for okay. So continue that deep breathing, and I'm going to narrate as we go through this, and you can say these things to yourself and in your mind. And so for loving kindness, the goal is to just put more kindness and compassion into the world. And we first start with ourselves. So thinking about who you are right now, who you are as a person, and also the version of you that came to be before you got to the present you. Thinking of yourself, thinking all that you've gone through, all that you've accomplished, all that you have persevered through. And then saying these statements to yourself. May I feel safe, may I feel loved, may I feel wanted, and may I always be enough. Continuing to breathe deeply as you go through this. Again, may I feel safe, may I feel wanted, may I feel loved, and may I always be enough. And turning this into more, active statements of I am safe, I am loved, I am wanted, and I am always enough. So continuing to deeply breathe. And we're going to now think about someone who we love, whether that be a family member, a friend, a person that you just care deeply about, and extending these words to them as you think about your history together, how they, just being a human being, deserve these feelings of compassion and love. May they feel loved, may they feel safe, may they feel that they're always enough, and may they feel wanted. And thinking about the characteristics that make them who they are and why you care so deeply for them. And again, making those statements active statements. They are loved, they are wanted, they are enough, and they are safe. Now we're transitioning to a neutral person. This could be someone you encounter on a daily basis that you might not be very close to, but an acquaintance, or a barista at Starbucks, or the cashier at the grocery. Again, another human being who also is worthy of love, compassion, and kindness just for being a human being. And so those statements of may they feel safe, may they feel wanted, may they feel loved, and may they always feel like they are enough. Knowing that they have their own story, their own history of things that they have gone through, things that made them who they are today, that for some reason or another, they have ended up who they are, and that is a human who deserves love and compassion. So again, may they feel wanted, may they feel safe, may they be loved, and may they feel like they are always enough. And continuing to breathe deeply, transitioning to some person that might feel harder to extend compassion towards. And this is a person who you might not be the biggest fan of, who might have hurt you or others in some type of way, but they are still a person, and they're still a human being, deserving of compassion and kindness for just being a human being. And so stretching ourselves to extend compassion and kindness and love towards them. May they feel safe, may they feel loved, may they feel wanted, may they always feel like they're enough. Because at the end of the day, even those who we don't like for whatever reason, they have their own story, and they have their own history of how they came to be who they are. And a lot of times it's filled with a lot of hardships, traumas, things like that aren't necessarily their faults, but they don't always excuse their behavior, or they don't excuse their behavior, but they could explain it at the end of the day. And so again, may they feel loved, may they feel safe, may they feel wanted, and may they always feel like they're enough. As we come to a close with this exercise, just taking a few more deep breaths through our nose and out through our mouth. We're coming back to ourselves and who we are today in this room. Saying the phrase to ourselves, I am loved, I am safe, I am wanted, and I am always enough. And as we exit out this exercise, continuing to deep breathe as it is comfortable for you. And when you're ready, you can come back to the space that we're in right now. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ali, so much for that. I feel much more calmer now. All right, so it's time to start our panel discussion, and we've saved some time for Q&A afterward. For those joining us virtually through the live streaming, please feel free to ask those questions in the chat. And please join me in welcoming our panel before Dr. Ross gets it started.
Thank you very much, Lauren and Ali. So I will start up with some AAPI statistics. And we can see here that from the 2020 census survey, there are 5.9% of AAPI in our country, 1.6% in Kentucky, and 2.4% in Louisville. And in Louisville itself, most Asians 5 years or older are foreign-born and speak another language besides English. And here, let's look at the mental health, especially in terms of depression and anxiety. Compared to the year 2019, look at 21% in 2020 for the Asian and Pacific Islanders. That's the highest increased rates among all races in America. That's a huge jump. And let's look at the AAPI group. Their financial problems are about the same as other groups. The loneliness or isolation rates are about the same with other groups. But grief or loss of someone or something is much lower. Probably our panelists could shed light on some of why so grief is so low in the AAPI community. Actor Simon Lear said that we need to peel back the stereotypes and generalizations to get to the core of who we really are on encouraging Asian communities to share their stories. So here we go. We're going to share our stories. And so I have a question for our panelists. Based on your lived experience, what do you think could be key contributing factors to the mental health status of the AAPI individuals? Who wants to go first? Kellen, thank you.
Disclaimer, I'm a urologic surgeon, so I'm not a mental health specialist. I'm just talking about me personally as a 1.5. So those who don't know what that term is, I wasn't born here. I moved to Texas in the 90s. We did a lot of moving back and forth, but ultimately when I was almost in 9th grade. So I have a lot of background in Korea, where I was, certain expectation of homogenous society in Korea in the 80s and 90s. And then I moved here in 99, literally about to have the Y2K, so many millennial changes. So, Britney Spears, Backstreet Boys was big back then, and then now 2023. So for me personally, just being in between that generation, not just like the age, but culturally, there are a lot of various expectations in Korea or Asian countries. Respect your elders and don't try to stick out. More homogenous. You kind of do kind of same job. You work your hard, and individualization was celebrated, but not to the extent here. So when I moved here, now I start high school. It was like, oh, you can express yourself and be who you are, but at the same time, at home or what I'm used to, I'm not used to that. So it was like, I need to be authentic self, but what is my authentic self, right? So as immigrant family with a generational trauma, which I come to learn that terminology during the pandemic, I think a lot of folks have generational trauma, no matter your skin, color or your culture group. We all have it, but as an Asian American diaspora, member, there's a unique trauma of, the Korean War or, colonization that Korea had to suffer. So that there's a unique struggles, and then we bring that to U.S., and now we're living in U.S. post-pandemic, a lot of negative things happening with violence. So just trying to navigate that, at the same time, still be true to your heritage. I think that was a lot. So I guess expectation of Asian Americans, who came from, various backgrounds can be tough too. But one last thing I do remember is in Korea, we were taught, and I think in Chinese culture too, you don't even step on your teacher's shadow. So that's how we were believed to kind of authority, anybody older, wiser, teacher, you don't ever ask questions. But in here, as we know in small group especially, you have to ask questions, but at the same time, you have to be respectful, but it's okay to ask questions. So that's something I had to learn past 20-something years being in the state, and be okay to not feel guilty. Like, am I enough to ask this kind of questions to somebody much older and wiser? But answer what I told my 6-year-old is, yes, it's okay. Everybody is experts in something, right? You're expert at being a 6-year-old in 2023, so I can learn from you. So I don't know if that answer, I went so many off tangent. I should have written down what I was gonna say, but.
Am I supposed to say something?
Oh, no.
You handed me the mic. Anyway, so now that I have the mic, Danielle, 1 second. So the first thing as a disclaimer is I don't have any letters behind my name. No PhDs, no nothing, right? So there's no letters, so it gives me the license to say what the heck I feel like. And I think, so I'm a pretty old guy as compared to everybody else here and who I see in the audience. And we've been here for 36 years, and I've raised 2 children. And I'm Indian American, which is the fastest growing demographic in the Asian American communities. And I completely agree with you. I mean, the one thing about Asia and Asian Americans is that everyone has a deep-rooted cultural background. Whatever that culture is, it's deep-rooted. So I remember what my parents behaved like, my uncles behaved like, my aunts behaved like, my grandparents behaved like. My children will remember what we behave. Apart from anything that we would hand out as you should do this or you should do that. Just our sheer behavior sets the tone for the next generation. And I think that is something which is very, very important to remember as far as the Asian communities are concerned, as opposed to any other continent. America for sure, Australia, even Europe, diverse as they are, the deep-rooted cultural backgrounds for us, which goes back thousands of years, not hundreds, is expressed in our behavior. And that is very important to remember. It is very natural for a teenager to say, why should my parent behave with me in this way? And the challenge is my neighbor, who is from a white family, their parents don't behave in the same way as you behave. So there is that natural tension that will take place. But at the end of the day, they will remember how my parents reacted in situation 1, situation 2, situation 3. And as they say very well, and I've experienced this, is when my children when they went into their 30s, they suddenly discovered how smart I was. Until then, I was one of the stupidest people who couldn't understand what the heck was going on. So I personally feel the other part of the other half of the question, which I really wanted to answer, is the thing that characterizes Asian Americans as a community, and I'm talking about all Asian Americans, is this, it's not so much the need, but they just want to succeed. They want to do things. They want to do things. They want to learn. They want to contribute. So we've got this energy behind us as Asian Americans, and that energy comes out, whether it is as a teacher or as a business person or whatever it is, it comes out. It's that energy. And we must never forget that all of these things that happen, when I think about mental health, I feel mental health is the attitude that you would adopt to be very positive. Positivity, let's accomplish something, let's do something. That, I feel, is my interpretation of mental health. I'm not saying whether it's good mental health or not good or indifferent. I'm just saying if you're mentally strong, you'd say, I am worth something, which Ali just mentioned. I am worth something, and I am going to express it. And based on our culture, our education, and our values and morals, etc., we go out and try to accomplish things for our benefit and the benefit of everybody else.
Hi guys, so I'm going to echo what Dr. Choi said. I too am a 1.5 generation. My father was a migrant in '96, and 2 years later we followed. So I came to America at the age of 7. We moved to Birmingham, Alabama. And so 5 years later, 2 months before 9/11, we moved to Louisville, Kentucky. And so I still remember August of that year, I started Mizik. And surely enough, 2 months later, it was 9/11. So some of the notes that I've taken, which I think both of the panelists made important points on, I think the biggest contributor is just finding your identity, right? Knowing who you are. In Eastern society, you were kind of given that identity, whether it's what household you were born in, whether you're Asian, Chinese, Pakistani, Indian, what religion you follow, and then essentially what you can and cannot do. Like Dr. Choi said, you know, we were kind of expected to follow a mold, and it was almost like you don't disobey your professors, you respect your elders, yes ma'am, no ma'am, etc. So then when you move to America, you know, at the age of 7, finding that identity piece is probably the most difficult point in a child's life. So I think finding your identity is one thing. Second thing that I put on is I don't think the term mental health existed in my family's dictionary, at least. We never, you know, looked at it, we never thought of it, and it wasn't because we did it, you know, intentionally. It was unintentional. It was just that back in Eastern society, mental health was just never looked into. So coming to America, learning how important mental health is, how you should prioritize it, how you should do healthy habits to tackle some of the things that you're dealing with, that too was something new of a change that we needed to adapt to. And then lastly but not least, you know, in the Eastern society, at least in a Muslim household that I was in, I was taught that, you know, it's not okay to not be okay. And so you're a man, and you essentially have to be okay. You do not show any weaknesses. And so just coming to grab with that reality, right? Figuring out who I am as a human being, learning the Western society, learning that language barrier, teaching my parents that was a little difficult at times. But the last thing I want to add is the stigma. I think that is a very challenging aspect that even Americans deal with today. You know, when it comes to addiction, depression, anxiety, there's a lot of language that kind of makes it impossible to seek out help because of how the stigma language has put on that barrier for people seeking help. And so for Asian Americans, when you come to this society, you think that Asian Americans have it all together. They have the job, they have the performance, they have the grades. They're gonna be okay. But essentially, you know, what I've learned time after time is that we are some of the most vulnerable population that bottles up things because we have never been taught to seek help or ask for help. So I think those are some of the contributors that I could think of.
I would just add to that as a fourth generation Asian American. When I was young, I was the only mixed race person in my family and in both of my communities. I grew up in Hawaii and California. In Hawaii, I'd get picked on for being white, and in California, I'd get picked on for being Asian. But it made me a keen observer of the differences between my two families. In my white family, if something was wrong, you said, "I don't feel good, you know, something's wrong." In my Asian family, you did not. And I spent a lot of time with my grandparents, who often would say this. They would say, think about how your actions are impacting others. That was always the first directive. And although Asians are not a monolith, you know, we are some 40 or 50 different ethnicities and cultures, but we're all old cultures who I think have evolved for the good of the community first, and then the good of yourself second. There's good and there's bad to that, but I do think that that's where that comes from, just observing. Fifth generation of my family, a lot of mixed kids. Blasian, Wasian, Lasian, you name it. Our whole family is mixed up. But in my day, I was an anomaly, and I became an observer.
I think speaking to like the stigma of like mental health just in the Asian American community. So I'm a practitioner. I've been in clinical practice for about 2 years now, and the Asian American clients that I've seen have all come in with very similar ailments like anxiety and depression and things like that. I think speaking to the larger like societal cultural expectations of Asian Americans, like Daniel was mentioning, that we really didn't have a choice of like whether to succeed or not. It was either succeed or like nothing. Like you don't have no choice here. And for me growing up, so I'm adopted from China. I came here when I was 2 years old, and I grew up in a white family in Frankfort, Kentucky, which not the most exotic place in the world. But so I was probably like one of like 3 Asian people in my school at the time. But even though I didn't have like family members or just the pressure from family to do certain expectations, I still felt it societally as an Asian presenting person, even though I didn't really feel Asian on the inside. It didn't feel like there was an option that to not like go to college and get my master's and succeed in school or succeed in an instrument and things like that. Otherwise, I wasn't good enough. I had a very high bar to reach, and a lot of times I did reach it, but at what cost, I think, is the big question. Like, what cost? And that model minority myth that follows all of us to some degree, it really undermines and does not acknowledge the actual hard work, perseverance, resilience that it takes to succeed as an Asian American person. It's just kind of attributed to like, oh, you're Asian, that's just it. Congrats. And it also is deeply rooted in racism. It came up in the 1950s in the civil rights movement to make Black Americans look bad, honestly. That is the purpose of it. And honestly, it kind of was created and it put those communities against each other, which are still working to rebuild and repair over the years. But I think that, that just crushing pressure that's put on Asian Americans to succeed, it's not surprising, or we shouldn't be surprised. It's leading to high rates of depression, high rates of anxiety, and the idea that it's not okay to not be okay, I think explains, or at least points to the fact that the statistic that pointed out their grief was not really a statistic that was measurable to other populations. Because I know for a lot of my Asian American friends, when something bad happened to them, they just kind of move on, like immediately. And I don't know if that's the healthiest way to do so, but I also find myself doing it. Because again, it doesn't feel like there's not an option to otherwise.
I would just add real quickly that my family settled in Monterey Park because where the shooting was a couple months ago. And I had gone back since the shooting, and everybody was very matter-of-fact about it. Very, just another day, don't talk about it. And I do think that that's the way Asian communities handle those things.
Yeah. Okay.
And I don't want to offend anyone because this show was pretty at part-times vulgar. Over the weekend, preparing for this, I watched a Netflix series called Beef, and it talks about a lot of Asian American mental health. So some scenes can be a little graphic, so you definitely don't want. It's like 17 and up. So, but it kind of talks about that. One of the mother-in-law of the main character talks about as soon as you say it, it comes reality. You have to admit it, and then you have to deal with it. So as long as you don't say that so-and-so died or so-and-so is sad, then you don't have to deal with it. So I think that's why not admitting the grief was so prevalent.
Anyone else has anything to add? If not, I'm gonna, summarize this point based on their lived experience. Very, very good, excellent points about the Asian cultures living as an Asian. You could hear things like, as Dee pointed out, that even though we are from different cultures, but our cultural roots are deeply sharing common grounds. Respect. Should I ask my professors questions? Should I talk back to my authority? Should I talk back to my parents? And is it okay to not be okay? Or is it not okay to be not okay? What is my identity? Who am I? I am Asian looking, living with white parents, and only 3 Asians in my school. And what should I do? And the expectations from the society are always so high for the AAPI. Because you look Asian, you are Asian, you're gonna be okay no matter where you are. No matter what happens, you are okay. Because you are Asian, you don't need any particular attentions. Because you guys are doing so well, you know, so diligent, and you are so productive. Okay, you're fine. And that's the point that I think our keynote speaker will talk in details as well. And so stigma and other things and mental health, is there such a term in this world? Mental health, what is it? What does that mean? I don't know what it is. So many things could be going on in our mind. And so there's a lot for us to think about. Contributing factors to the mental health status of the AAPI community. And now I would like to ask our panelists to share with us what you think, would be helpful in terms of promoting the mental health status and also to prevent anything that could go wrong. Yep. Who wants to go first?
So I think this, right? The fact that we're here gathered and then we are talking about it, that it's okay to not be okay. I think there was like, I guess I watched too much TV, but there was a show called It's Okay to Be Not Okay. So I guess for the whole idea that Asians are gonna be okay and you swallow your emotion. I talk about Korean examples because that's my heritage, but Korean men are told that they can only cry 3 times in their life: when they're born, and I forgot the second one, but when their parents pass away. So I don't know what the other second, I'm already forgetting my Korean roots. But my point is, like, the men are told, like, you cannot show emotions and crying and things like that. But as soon as we let us kind of feel those uncomfortable feelings, like the sadness or the emptiness, that's not to say that you're ungrateful or you don't have faith in whomever you believe. You can have God that you believe in. But it's not that you're weak, but it's just part of life. I don't know if anybody watched In and Out. Is it the movie that, it's like a Pixar movie, I think? But it talks about there's happiness, there's disgust, there's all sorts of anger. So if being angry was so harmful and not safe, why did it pass down generation of, like next generation, like as a gene? So being angry or having certain emotion is there to also protect us from something that we need to be aware of. So I think just talking about it, and if you can see when somebody is not doing well, and then just let them know, like, hey, is there anything I can do to help? Or just acknowledge it. Hey, I had a moment in my life where I felt XYZ, and this helped me. Like, I'm not saying you are, but if you ever want to, this is a good space to do that, and I think that really helps. So
everything I'm going to say is based on my perspective and my walk of life. I think the first starting point is me being a 1.5 generation. It's kind of up to me because I have so much interaction with the Western society. It's up to me to educate my parents on how they can conform to the Western society because of their limited interaction. So things that I learned at school, things that I have gone through, tried experiences, perhaps it may be better to teach them also so that way they can express their mental health as well, right? Essentially, for the most part, we take after our parents. So we are taught that not having mental health issues is okay. But to teach them that mental health issue is perfectly normal, you're breaking the barrier. You're setting up a new precedent so that you have that discussion, you have that dialogue. So I think that's the starting point. Next, I think for you yourself, you have to figure out what your contribution to life is. When you moved here, when I moved here, I needed to figure out what my definition of success was. I know what my parents' definition of success for me was. That was either a doctor, a lawyer, a businessman, or nothing, all right? If I wasn't any of those things, I was nothing. So essentially, I had to come up with what was my definition of success, what I felt passionate about, and then I had to figure out how I was going to tell my parents that, hey, what you envisioned for me was probably not what I envisioned for myself, right? So that conversation, that dialogue is not usually the easiest thing, but it is necessary because when you're doing that, you're setting up your own mental health. That's therapy, believe it or not, when you're talking to your parents and you're having that conversation. Last but not least, I think just knowing that it's okay to not be okay. I mean, we're all humans, right? And so it is okay to not be okay. Personally, I was not okay for about 2-3 years, and I just did not know the feelings that I was going through. And my parents couldn't help because they didn't know the term mental health in their dictionary. So for me, I literally had nobody to turn to. And so essentially, I had to go to my mentor. And my mentor was not Asian American. And so he kind of gave me a different perspective on life. But essentially, you have to find somebody that can guide you, direct you through life. And sometimes when you come from another country, having that mentorship can be a difference maker.
So now I have to be that parent. Somebody has to be, okay. So I think I need to give you a little bit of background. We came here in this country in 1986. I was 36 years old. I had a fantastic career in India before we moved here, and we moved here for the benefit of education for my son. He needed special education, which is perfectly fine, but at the time that's what. And I came in here with the background of having done all kinds of things in corporate India, and I said to myself, darn, anything is possible. And so therefore I moved here with lots of bravado, and I'm that parent. I moved here with a lot of that bravado with small children, and obviously a few things go on with every parent. You want to insulate your children from anything that you have experienced. And insulation means I don't want you to step in the puddle. I'm telling you where the darn puddle is. Don't step in it, right? That's what we talk about, and that's really what parents are telling their children. So having done that, I don't have letters behind my name, but I do have a master's in business, and I've done all kinds of other education, but I couldn't find a job. So what 1.5s and beyond generations don't immediately face is, I'll call it racism in your face. I mean, that's what I faced. I couldn't find a job. Here's a highly educated, successful executive, and I couldn't find a darn job. So I did the next best thing. The next best thing was to start my own business. And I didn't know how to start a business, don't have a network, don't have anything, and you're out at sea. Really, I don't know anybody. So then a friend turns up, and there's a group of Palestinians, also I would say they're from Asia, very obviously, And they helped me buy a grocery store and run a grocery store, a neighborhood grocery store, an MBA, an executive from Tata Steel in India. My head is in the clouds, and all I'm doing is lugging potatoes, right? So that is the life of the immigrant. That is the life of the first generation person who comes in, who wants to put their feet down for the benefit of their children. And then we moved on from there. I had the smarts, I had the knowledge, I had the contacts to build a business. So I built an export business, then I built an IT business, then all kinds of things. At one point in time, when I turned 60 years old, a bug bit me. And the bug said, this is not all. Just, working hard and making money and building business after business is not all. There's more to life. And I didn't know what was more to life. So I joined the city. I became the director for globalization. Wonderful experience, because you meet so many people and you hear so many stories across different generations, across different viewpoints, and so on and so forth. And having done all of that, I think I inspired a whole generation of people to follow. And I think there are people who have been following, and people who come to me and say, well, what can we do? What can we do? What can we do? And again, not necessarily reacting to you, Daniel, but I'm saying, as a parent, we take it upon ourselves to say, our job is to blaze the trail, protect the people who are going to come behind us, and the first people who are going to come behind us is our children. So as a parent, it's one thing for somebody, and I've seen this in my I'd say, the white nieces and nephews, when they're attending to their children, they say, we don't say this, we don't do this, that's how, because they're afraid to kind of cause some trauma, if you will. In my case, I'd say, do the darn thing, otherwise I'll give you one slap, right? And they're going to do it. And that's a big difference. But you've experienced that as a child. I have done it as a parent for the better, in my opinion, because when I'm doing that, I have nothing but the best interests of my children at heart. The long and the short of it is, I want to mention one thing, is that I think this interaction makes I'll call it the Asian American community, stronger. The culture that is behind us, the thousands of years of behavior that we have seen, makes you talked about anger. Anger is common to all 7.5 billion people. And it's a matter of cortisol. How much cortisol you have in your bloodstream at that particular point in time. The cortisol goes, your anger goes. And that's neuroscience 101. The point is, how soon can the cortisol go down is determined by your circumstances, by your culture, by what you've seen other behavior is, and you let it settle down. Anger dissipates. When anger dissipates, your behavior, which is manifested because of anger, also dissipates. And that's when we talk about mental, not necessarily health, but how we behave is really determined by our deep-rooted culture, by the family ties that we have, and the connections that we have within the community. I think that is very important to know.
I think, going off your point, the community is one of the answers to the question that was originally presented, conversation first, but also community. And in my own experience growing up as an Asian person in Kentucky with a white family, didn't feel like there was a community very much so. And so it was an incredibly lonely experience in so many ways. And things I had not even started to grapple with until I was like 26, so like last year. So it's just so many things to discover. And so when the Asian hate crimes are on a rise during the COVID-19 pandemic, literally no one else in my circle was talking about it, so I wasn't going to talk about it. But it deeply affected me, more than I would like to admit, especially at the time. And those conversations, like you said, they're hard, they're uncomfortable, but they're so needed, not just amongst like the AAPI community, but just everyone who's a human in general. We have all these emotions that makes us complicated and complex human beings, but that's what makes us human. That's what makes us different than lizards, okay? It's part of the experience, and denying ourselves that and pushing it down and avoiding it is not helping literally anyone, especially yourself. And so those conversations are so important. but they're also very risky and they take vulnerability, right? And no one, or a lot of people, aren't going to raise their hand and be like, yes, let's talk about your deepest fears and desires in front of everyone else. But sometimes it doesn't even take that, right? Sometimes it just takes admitting that you had a hard time, and that's it. You don't have to go into detail, but also, in order to go into those details and be comfortable being vulnerable, you need that community piece. So for myself, as a transracial adoptee, not really that many people in my circle, and so I found and discovered a community online of people who are like me, who are adopted from Asian countries, and are mostly like in our 20s now. And it's been very eye-opening and also comforting in a way to know that there are other people like me out there, and those are the people I can have tough conversations with because they get it. And I think given being in Kentucky, sometimes it's hard to find those communities, especially as an Asian person. As a provider, I've worked with a decent number of Asian people, and a lot of them, myself included, has thought this thought of like, oh, it's been really hard to find a provider that I can connect to in this way. And myself included, is very hard to find a provider who I could connect to in terms of being Asian or being adopted. And it was hard to find both of them at the same time. I have not found that yet. So if anyone knows one, let me know. I think, so conversation, community, and then I guess larger community of not just the AAPI community connecting with each other, but also other peoples of color, other just white people in general, being curious, being open-minded that, hey, we struggle too. We're not just because we're Asian, because we're successful. We're struggling too, and not having that precedent or like lowering those, or dimming down those stereotypes and generalizations, because we're people too at the end of the day.
I just have a ask of the society at wide that actually is going to happen anyways, but given that the traditional white American culture will soon be a minority. By 2015, white Americans will be a minority. And with the vast increase of immigration into our country, I would like to ask that people do not objectify others. Growing up, I think because of the tendency in Asian families to be deferent and quiet and not speak out, I think sometimes we are objectified. And when I say we, I'm thinking of my family. I've had it many times where we go somewhere and people will come and talk straight to me and ignore the rest of my family. And when I was young, we were on a beach where a big resort was built from the mainland-owned resort, a beach that we've been going to forever. And I come out of the water and they're kicking my grandparents off the beach, not me. So that's an objectification and assumptions made. I have a lot of grad students from different places, and despite language barriers, I always make a point to listen carefully and acknowledge humanity. And I think that goes a long way, and that will help mental health.
I just wanted to echo something which Dimitra said about the population. This is a very important subject to be kept in mind about the majority-minority equation, which is obviously one of reality. I also, this is in sheer terms of population, but in terms of economic growth and purchasing power and so on and so forth, I think Asian Americans will outstrip most other ethnicities very fast. They probably are very close to being in the top right now. And where I'm going with this is what she mentioned is even though the populations may be, let's assume it's 50-50, in most places, we still will have the 80-20 rule. 80% of the elected officials are going to be Caucasian for many, many years to come unless we Asian Americans stand up and run for public office. I'm particularly proud. I mentioned that I was searching at one point on what else is there? Is there something else in life? And in searching, the first thing I decided to do was to start interacting with everything outside, every single thing outside. I was on the board of the advisory board of the International Councils. I was the president of the Crane House Asia Institute for many years, and on the board for many years, and multiple. I mean, you name it. I was on the Venture Connectors board. I was the chair on the Vote Awards. And over a period of time, I'm going to say about 6, 7, maybe 5 years, I was part of everything that you could think about as mainstream involvement in a small enclave like Louisville, Kentucky. But it's possible to do that anywhere else. The first step is to step out. Our culture says don't show yourself too much, but that's not true. Step out. I think by having stepped out, people recognize you for what you are. They appreciate your comments, they appreciate your background. Because guess what? Everybody is looking for the same, we'll call it mental health. Everybody is looking for comfort. Everybody is looking for the same things. So they appreciate our point of view. So our point of view as Asian Americans must come out. And when that happens, I would encourage, and I have been particularly successful in that my daughter decided, in spite of her being a very good attorney, and I would have typically as a parent said, go make money, build your law firm, you got everything going for you, do this. But she decided she wanted to run for public office. And she ran for public office, she stands up for all kinds of things, and she does that. And I'm so eternally proud because she's decided to do that. And I would encourage so many more young Asian Americans to say, let's step up, let's make ourselves visible. When we make ourselves visible, we can stand for public office, because guess what? Unless you are in public office, you cannot make policy. And the 80-20 rule, the 20% of the, or whatever it is, the 80% who are the elected officials or whoever's going to make policy will be 50% of the population. They'll be deciding our future. Why should our people not get in there and decide our own future?
Anything else?
So you mentioned 5.9% are statistically represented by AAPI. I learned from your daughter last year because she was our AAPI opening speaker, and she said we need to fill out the census. So 2020, when it comes, a lot of people are busy, don't do it, but that's where it matters. We count, right? So we need to fill out, bubble those census. So that's tangible action item we can do.
All right, we need NIH funding, and we need to fill out the form, right? Yeah. I'm sure I have this. Yes, thank you. All right, thank you. Excellent points again. I'm so happy to have a panelist here today. And so my questions to the panelists was, what should we do to promote the mental health of the Asian community, or to prevent any mental health issues? And here's what I'm hearing. It seems like you have to admit first, right? Admit that the mental health is real. And what would I do with those who don't have the term mental health in their vocabulary? Like Daniel, he would educate his parents. So we can educate others to help them acknowledge and understand that the problem is real. Mental health issues are real. And that's not easy because Asian Americans still find themselves rooted deeply in the culture, finding the identity. Who am I? Am I really 100% Asian, 100% American now, or half and half, or what's the ratio? It's not that easy. And what I am hearing like recurring themes is connection, 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 and reach out. First, you have to be able to acknowledge, admit that the mental health problem is real by education, by your own lived experience, and then make a connection. You have to connect, have to be resourceful, have to reach out, find a peer support group, find a mentor who could help you understand things better. And so, besides connection, that's part of it that you need to step up to speak for the whole community. You have to reach out. You have to run for an office. You have to become a public figure. Not everyone can do that, but some of us have to do it. Don't be isolated. Make sure that you are not going to be suffering alone, all alone. As a collectivism community instead of individualism. That is a strong point that we have as Asian Americans. And one thing that is important and sometimes poignant is that we all have emotions. Sometimes we understand our emotions, sometimes we don't. Sometimes our emotions can lead us to do something good, sometimes not so good. There's a lot for us to think about in terms of emotions. And I want to play you a little video clip from this little guy who talks with his mom. Just hold on a minute. We can't hear.
Upset sometimes.
Yeah.
We don't get what we want all the time.
Mama also don't. Papa also don't. But it's hard for babies to do that. They're still babies. They don't understand. They have to not do that. You know, earlier, baby dropped the. You did not make it without choice. So you hurt my feelings by not going outside. So that's why I didn't want to make this a smart choice. You know, earlier I couldn't go outside, so I was still a little sad.
Yeah,
hmm
but that was a consequence.
But after I was a little sad, I was a little bit upset. More than a little.
More than a little upset?
hmm
Yeah. We all get upset sometimes.
Yeah.
We don't get what we want all the time.
Mama also don't. Papa also don't. But it's hard for babies to do that. They're still babies. They don't understand they have to not do that. You know, earlier, baby dropped the plate and Papa got angry with her, and I told Papa to make this. I told Papa to stop breathe slow and make a small choice for Papa.
And then did he do it?
Yeah, but earlier I chose to be a tiny bit mad, but after a while I was okay.
You were okay?
Life
is like that. We get upset, we get mad, we cry.
That's emotions, Mama.
That's emotions, I know. And then we feel better after we cry.
Yep. You do, even when you're upset or angry. Always different kinds of feelings. Even though when you're scared.
That's another emotion.
Yeah, a different kind of emotion. No, I was wrong. Today, I had a hard time doing my emotions.
Yeah,
Yeah, it is today.
that's okay.
But
We're learning.
but
You're
when-
learning
when-
also.
Even though when I was that mad, you still love me that so much.
Of course. Always.
Yeah, I love you too.
Yep. So we all have emotions. We all need to recognize our emotions. We all just human. We need to take good care of ourselves, our family, our community, and our friends. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ross. Josiah, can we go back to the PowerPoint?
Just close out of that, and it'll be right up there.
Out of the, oh, okay. Okay, thank you. All right, so now we're at a point where we can have some Q&A. If anyone in the room would like to ask a question of the panelists, you're welcome to come up to the mic. We also are opening it up to those joining us virtually, if you have any questions. Do you mind coming up to the mic, Shirley?
To thank you all so much for your wonderful panel discussion today. I really appreciated it. All of you said some wonderful things that I'm so glad that we're talking about. I come and bring my experience as a 1.5 generation Asian American. My parents immigrated here and I was born here in America. And I lived in, not Louisville growing up, but similar environment to Louisville where it was, you know, not a whole ton of Asian people around me when I was growing up. And because of that, I definitely felt that tension about, you know, I saw my friends' parents who were white and they had different expectations for what their kids were. I felt, you know, a lot of pressure on myself to succeed. And that really, honestly, negatively affected my relationship with my parents growing up. But as I've gotten older, like, I've developed a lot more empathy. I've kind of realized that a lot of that kind of pressure wasn't necessarily because of, like, you know, that tiger parent stereotype, like, you know, you have to succeed or else. It was because my parents struggled so much when they were growing up. My parents struggled to make it here. They were not very, you know, wealthy or like had a lot of resources coming to the States. And I am at a point now where I'm trying to rebuild my relationship with my parents, and trying to navigate what that might look like. And so I'd really like to talk to, you know, especially our first generation panelists about what that might look like for people who are coming to that place where, like, my mental health was really bad when I was growing up. But now that I'm an adult, now that I have a little bit more perspective on what it means to grow up, what it means to reevaluate what success looks like, and now that I'm in a place where I'm trying to think about how am I going to do this for my own kids? How can I begin having those conversations?
I can go first. Thank you, Shirley, for asking that. Can you hear me?
Of course.
Hello?
Sorry.
That's okay. All right. Thank you, Shirley, for asking that question. It's a very important question to ask. And, you know, before you asked that question, I was going to thank Dr. Kulkarni for, you know, bringing his perspective, because essentially he is right. You know, when we are kids and we're looking from a kid's perspective on a parent, parents strive. I mean, they strive to give their kids everything that, you know, the kids need. And essentially, for me personally, my parents came here, they left everything back home. I mean, they started, I think our first 14 days in Alabama were in Best Western. You know, so when you think about that perspective, you're just like, man, they literally committed, right? So when they impose a certain way for you to succeed, it's not essentially all bad. They want the best for you, and essentially they don't want to see you struggle the way they struggle. That's the biggest key that I think I had to learn from their perspective to understand why they were saying some of the things they were saying and doing the things they were doing. I remember when I was in high school, there were times when I couldn't spend a night out. And essentially, you know, my mom always said a quote to me, and she was just like, you know, the street that you don't belong in, you don't even want to look at, right? So essentially, it's almost like if you stay out, you're just asking for trouble, right? But I saw all my friends doing those things, and I was just like, no, I want to be part of that, right? So again, it goes back to finding your identity, right? Finding out what is acceptable in your books and what's not. For me, I had to, you know, come to terms with a lot of things that were just cultural expectations that just weren't for me. And I think having that dialogue with your parents, one, first telling them that you understand their perspective, and then having them understand your perspective, it opens up room for a lot of therapy that you're giving them that you don't even realize, right? And so the last point that I want to make is mental health. I think our brain and our minds are probably the most powerful organ that we have. So, you know, if you have mental health, you have everything. I mean, if you're depressed, if you're anxious, you're not gonna wanna go to the gym. You're not gonna go to the class and study and get a good grades, right? So I think putting priority on mental health is something that we should advocate for more openly. Because if you have mental health, then you have essentially yourself, your self-identity, your self-concept. And it's funny because now MCAT, you know, I'm studying for the MCAT, and they literally highlight this biopsychosocial analysis, and they talk about all of this stuff in there. And I'm just like, man, had I known this when I was a kid, so that's all I have. Thank you, Shirley.
Of course.
So let me add again a little bit. I think 95% is common to all humanity. Parents, children, rearing, parenting is common to all humanity. What we have is two separate dynamics as immigrants and Asian Americans. One is the dynamic which Daniel also articulated, and I felt it as a parent. We want to protect our children. We want to put good roots down. We want to make sure that they don't suffer at the end of the day, right? Because we've seen the suffering ourselves, we don't want them to suffer. That's one dynamic. The second dynamic is children. You, Danielle, Ali, as you're growing up, is finding, we call it finding the identity, but in matter of fact, I feel there is the tussle of wanting to fit in to what you call the American culture. And because of the demographic that exists, and most of our neighbors are not going to be Asian Americans or even different ethnicities that we are familiar with. There will be white, Caucasians, or African American. You find that their behavior, going out, spending the night out, or going to areas, and your mother saying, "Don't go to area." It'll be worse for ladies, for girls. I mean, they would be like barricaded. You're not going to go there, right? I'm not going to reason with you. You simply not. It's all protection. But the tussle is from your age generation. You're saying, well, everybody else is doing it. Why can't I do it? So part of it is just being a regular old teenager. And the second is trying to, one, fit in, because there is that innate human urge to belong, to feel part of anything. So that's what we are struggling with. I think the important thing to, again, reiterate to everybody is, most of it is just natural human biology. You just have to accept it. And the parents will continue to do the parenting, and the children will continue to do childrening, whatever that word is.
So I actually wrote this book because I texted Lauren, like I said, the permission to come home, reclaiming mental health as Asian Americans. So I grew up in Houston, and I was hanging out with two of my good girlfriends that I've known since high school, and they also have children. We have children, my husband and I. So we're talking about what can we do so we can kind of raise the best version of us, the best version of our grandparents, our parents in America in 2023. So this book, she's actually a clinical psychologist in Houston. She has an Instagram. I'm happy to share with y'all later. And she actually published this book, so I was like, let me read this over the break. So it basically talks about compassion for understanding each other and parents, and I really love this. Okay, so we will discuss, so we offer no blame or judgment for their, as in parents, inability to teach us the skills that they themselves lacked, but only compassion for how difficult it must have been to hold space for our emotion in the midst of their own emotional valleys as immigrants to new countries. So when I read that, I start crying. It was so strong because I know what the first generations did in the past, like my in-laws, my parents, you, everybody here, right? To make the best world for all of us, right? So I'm so thankful, but at the same time, I think we can all learn, including I can learn from my 3-year-old, I can learn from my 6-year-old. So what I'm trying to my best ability, I'm trying my best to, is that forgive and have compassion to each other. Whatever we did, I'm sure hurt our family too, like our parents too, right? Whatever teenage slamming the door, they just slammed the door. No, the window was open, but we all had that fight, right, with our parents. But just have the compassion to understand each other and then try to learn. Like everybody can learn. It doesn't matter if you're 1, if you're 100 years old, we can all learn from each other, right? So I think just like forgiveness and compassion and empathy and kindness. So if everybody is kind and try to understand each other's point of view, I think overall world will be a better place, right? So.
Thank you. Actually, real quickly, I agree with everyone there. Suhas, that parenting, you're gonna be parented all the time still, till the end of your life or the end of their lives. And so, yeah. And mental health is number one priority for sure, and the dynamic will keep going. And I can attest that because we have one son, he's 25, and he talks with me, he tells me, "Mom, you don't have to tell me that." And I would say, "Oh, okay," you know. And I am learning a lot from him too, about him being a half Asian, half white, being an American, Asian American here. And Daniel shared with you that talk with your parents. That's very important. You know, talk with your parents. That's huge. Keep talking with them because they keep forgetting like me. "Oh, I forgot. You said that already, huh?" And yeah, and so I think that's all I have to say. It's very important talking.
Thank you. I really appreciate
Yep.
everything that everyone has said. I've definitely already kind of started conversations, and I've definitely tried to bridge that gap myself. But I think that this is a struggle that a lot of like 1.5, 2 generation Americans, Asian Americans really struggle with, because we do have so much of that fitting in versus finding our cultural identity. A lot of us, especially if we're growing up in places like the Midwest or the South, we're not around a lot of Asian people. There's not a lot of community in terms of like other Asian kids are having to do the same things that you're kind of being asked to by your parents. And so you're facing that struggle. And so for a lot of, at least in my kind of like general like hearing experience, have seen a lot of kids struggle with that pushback between their parents and themselves. And as more and more immigrants come to America as the years go on, I think that this is something that we need to talk about, just so that that resentment doesn't build up, and that we're coming to a place where we can have that conversation and we can have that empathy. So I really appreciate everything that you have shared. And I invite anybody else who would like to come up and speak to please ask.
I'd like to make a comment, and I don't know if we have time at all for that. We have 4 minutes. I'll take 2 out of them. Yeah. So one thing that we have to appreciate is that we are in America. This country is one of the greatest melting pots in history. Whatever we've discussed for Asian Americans, I'll bet you the Italian American children felt that, the German American, everybody has felt that. Every single generation of immigrants, when they came here, they brought their culture, and then they tried to adapt themselves to these circumstances here, and the children were growing up, they became teenagers, they had all those hormones rushing, and then all the expectations that every single generation in America has definitely gone through what we just talked about. The important thing is that, to remember that America is a melting pot. We are part of that melting pot. I'm reminded of a story when from Iran, a whole community moved to India. There were Zoroastrians, and they came to India because Islam had come in and they couldn't practice their religion. And so they landed there, and the king said, "How can I allow somebody from outside the country to come in here? We're talking about hundreds and thousands of people. How can I allow this to happen?" So the leader of the Iranian community says, "Do me a favor and please bring me a glass of milk." So they brought the milk. Then he says, "Do me a favor and bring me some sugar." "You are the milk, we are the sugar. I'm putting the sugar in the milk and I'm stirring it. Now tell me, where is the sugar?" The sugar is all gone. So the point at stake is that when we move to this country, we are part of America. And what we need to do is, and in matter of fact, we are in a wonderful, wonderful position to expand on this point of view that, look, here we are, we've come from outside. It's not just assimilation, we are enriching. We are making that milk sweeter. That's what we are doing. That's our contribution. And I think it's imperative that every one of us, being successful and educated and able to do this, stand up and show that we are part of this country, we are enriching this country, and at some point in time when say, this country is great because of us.
And I have one last thing to say that, that hit the spot of my heart, that we're in this country, we're in America, and we're so fortunate to be able to live in this beautiful and rich country. And it doesn't matter which race we are, we need to forgive each other. We need to love one another. We need healing. The healing, the compassion, the love, and the hope will unite us as one. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ross. We just wanted to leave you all with some resources. There are definitely a lot of online resources actually for the AAPI community that have been borne out since the Atlanta shootings and what happened in Monterey Park. So please, we will share this slide deck out with people. Feel free to take pictures. You can Google those online resources. But we also wanted to make sure you all knew about the campus resources that we have here at UofL. The Peace Center is a wonderful place for you all to feel safe and get exposure to others who may be going through whatever trauma or stigma that you're experiencing. There's also mental wellness counseling just right down the stairs, I think, right around the corner. So please take advantage of these. There are opportunities for you to connect with other people. Please do not experience mental health, frustration, and difficulties on your own. Reach out. Whether people look like you or they don't look like you, you have to make that step, all right? So please take care of yourself. We also have a local community resource with the Asia Institute, and they recently did a lot of work around AAPI community and the lack of seeking that happens. And so please, knowing having learned about some of the struggles that the AAPI community experiences, if you know someone who is of the older generation who really struggles with seeking that help, please, just let them know it's okay. It is okay to seek that help. And I will close with that. And we've got, oh, did I close it? We actually have a survey, if you could go to that one. A feedback survey that we would really appreciate. It helps, give us some information about the types of programming and events you would like for us to provide for the AAPI community. We hope that everybody who joined learned something today and can take something with you. Thank you.